Coming up, a picture may have just given us a clue about Jalen Hurts' future at Alabama, and we'll talk about a former SEC star that needs to get a clue. All that on the way next, right here on SEC Country Live. Hello everyone and welcome to SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This, back from vacation, is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. I got to tell you, I am thrilled about something. We'll mention this quickly and then get on with the show. But right before the show started, Mike and I are sitting down getting settled. For some reason, Mike's chair, I could be wrong about this, it's like 4 inches lower than normal.
Oh, what's going on?
And these are not adjustable chairs. I'm not quite sure what happened. But for today, I get to feel like the former Alabama All-American. I'm towering above Mike here today. You look like the diminutive, host here. I got to tell you, I kind of like feeling a little high in the saddle in comparison to you.
There's some kind of conspiracy, right? I walk out for one day, you guys switch out my chair. I mean, these aren't even adjustable chairs.
It's like the old Johnny Carson show where the host sits up and the guest sits a little lower. It's like I'm in the host position over here.
I'll do my best.
Anyway, he may be sitting low, but his opinions will be red hot all day long. Let's dive into them right now the way we always do. It's our first and 10. It's all the big news around the SEC here for today, and we'll start with Jalen Hurts here, who, we'll show you the screen grab. I guess it's Isaiah Buggs who picks this up in Nashville. Or it's Nashville. What am I talking about? It's not Nashville. It's Tampa. They're in the Tampa area. You see IMG Academy there in the background. They're down there in Bradenton here. That's where IMG is for a leadership event. And in this picture, you do see Alabama quarterback Jalen Hurts here. So does this picture of leaders for the 2018 team, with Hurts included, your buddy Scott Cochran's in there as well, I see, does this photograph give us a clue that maybe Jalen Hurts is actually planning on being back at Alabama for 2018 and being among the leaders for that team?
Yeah, no, I wish that I could take it that far, right? I wish I could go there and say, boy, you know what? He wouldn't have gone down this trip if it had to do with his future, and maybe he's already made his mind up. He's trying to, put himself in as a member of this 2018 Alabama football team. He wants to make sure that he is a leader moving forward. Unfortunately, for me personally, I'm not sure the two are all that connected. I think I look at it and think that Jalen was offered the opportunity to go down to Bradenton with a ton of his teammates. I think that his mind is not made up in any way, whether or not he's transferring. And you say, you know what? If I am here next year, I do want to take that leadership role. He is, like it or not, he's only been there 2 years for Alabama fans, but like it or not, he is the elder statesman of the quarterback room. Yeah. I mean, he's going on year number 3 in the program, but he is the oldest quarterback on the roster. And I've mentioned this before to you guys a couple of times. When it comes to those rooms, taking care of guys in your room is something that Nick Saban implements in terms of leadership. So you're the elder quarterback, you're the returning quarterback on offense, the starter that's been there for 26 games the last 2 years. You go down to the leadership conference and hopefully to stir some things up. I don't think this is a clue about his future. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm reading it all wrong. I don't think this is that big a clue about his future.
Alabama's a better team if Jalen Hurts is the backup quarterback. I don't think really anybody would deny that. Mac Jones seemed to have a pretty good spring, and he certainly had a pretty good A-Day spring game. Yep. But Jalen Hurts provides the extra dimension. That's the guy that Alabama really needs. So while it's better for Alabama to have Hurts, it's probably also true that it's better for Hurts to go somewhere else. And frankly, there's almost an aspect of I'd be disappointed in Hurts were he to come back to Alabama, because he's really falling from one of the most thinly veiled sales jobs of all time. Obviously, Alabama wants him to stay. Obviously, they're going to try to do everything they can, including give him a free trip to on a leadership event down to IMG Academy here. But surely Hurts and his family and the outspoken, father who we've talked about before, surely they're going to see through what is, for me, nothing more than a master recruiter like Nick Saban doing some more recruiting here by trying to get Hurts to stay.
Listen, like it or not, there's a ton of upside to staying at Alabama for Jalen Hurts. Whether or not he starts, he's still going to get repetitions. I think he'll still carve out a role. He'll still, day in and day out, practice against probably the best defense in the country for next year. You have a chance at winning a ring. You don't have to switch schools and sit out a year. I mean, there's a ton of upside. If you're Jalen Hurts, why not come back for a season? Graduate next May, leave and transfer and be eligible somewhere immediately. I don't think it takes that much of a sales job to say, hey, you know what, Jalen? We'll give you a role. We'll give you 30, 40%, 50% of the snaps. We'll let you start alongside Tua. You'll have a package. You'll come back. We'll try to win the SEC this year. We'll try to win rings this year. I don't think it's that much of a sales job. I think there's a ton of upside to him showing back up in Tuscaloosa.
So I'm having a little bit of issue with my computer here in terms of the comments. We're going to take some comments on this because I know a lot of Alabama fans are weighing in on this. You want to read a couple of them while I get sort of
I mean, there's some people coming to statements. Steven Saylor says, say bye-bye to him, Tide boys. And there's other people. Bobby J. Smith brings up a good point. If Jalen goes to SEC Media Days days, that's when we'll know that he's going to be there for the long haul.
That's a really good point. But by July, though, we're going to know one way or another anyway.
Well,
You got to go before July, right?
I don't think so. What's the upside of Nick Saban, having him transfer, before July's over? I think it would be something Nick Saban would probably do to say, hey, listen, you are still leading.
I think that SEC Media Days, and for those that don't realize, I think that's actually a pretty interesting point by Bobby. For those that don't realize, SEC Media Days is an event that takes place in July. For the most part, every team takes, about 3 players, 3 or 4 players. They go down there, and those are hand-selected by the coaches to give the best possible message for that program. I don't think Alabama's taking any of its quarterbacks for that reason. You're not taking Tua Tagovailoa because he's barely played. Plus, you don't want to ask Jalen Hurts-centric questions to Tua Tagovailoa. Even if Hurts is on the roster, he's not going. They're going to take other guys. Right. They're not going to have quarterback questions as much as they can possibly help it at SEC Media Days because they do get to handpick who comes.
Yeah, this is a layup for Damian Harris, right? If you're going to take an offensive starter, this has Damian Harris written all over it. The senior returning running back, the guy that's been a feature back for the last couple of years. It's got Jalen Hurts. I don't know that it has Jalen Hurts really written on it when you talk about SEC Media Days, but it is interesting. I mean, if you are Nick Saban and you are pulling out all the stops the way some people seem to think that he is, and it is a sales job, do you send him to SEC Media Days and say, listen, look how important your team is? I don't think you do either. I think you hold that deck of cards for another day and you send somebody else because you don't want Jalen to get questioned for 2 straight days.
So I'm about to have the comment section pulled up here, and I'll start reading some comments. But it sounds like, based on what you just read a moment ago, from some of the non-Tide fans, there's a little bit of there's enjoying the drama here.
There's a hopefulness for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a hopefulness for sure that because I think it goes without saying that Jalen Hurts on the roster means Alabama's in a better place, right? I mean, that's true. I don't, starting or not starting, you can argue Tua over Jalen all day, but without Jalen on the roster, that is a hit to Alabama. So I understand where that comes from and that angle comes from.
Malachi Morgan says whether he ends up leaving or not, right now he's one of the leaders of the team. It makes sense for him to go on this trip. That may be true. That's Malachi Morgan, also from Facebook. Looks like my computer is up and running here pretty good here. Here's the one problem, and I'm going to make kind of a clunky analogy, but have you ever heard the expression about fast football players that when they make a mistake in the football field, they're running really fast in the wrong direction? Here's the problem if Jalen Hurts really is a leader. If he's a leader and he's heading elsewhere, does while he have tension with the other quarterbacks in this roster or tension with the coaching staff who may be choosing a quarterback besides him to be the starter, is he leading other players in the wrong direction? I have no doubt that Hurts, being a quarterback, probably is a leader. I think some of his teammates do gravitate towards him. Here's one of the situations, though, where you don't really want your backup quarterback to be too much of a leader. And Jalen Hurts is the backup at Alabama. That, to me, is essentially a foregone conclusion here. You don't want your backup to be too much of a leader because all of a sudden he's leading one faction one direction, and the other quarterback's leading a different faction in a different direction.
Yeah, I understand that. I don't think that it's as simple to me as being black and white as this guy's the starter and this guy's the backup. I still think that Jalen Hurts is going to be on the field this fall for the Tide, and I think that he will have that role. So with that being said, I don't know that you say, well, maybe 40% of the snaps is not enough for him to be the leader. I still think he has that voice in the locker room, and we've talked about this before. I still think a ton of people follow after what Jalen says and the example that he sets on the field.
But here's where I'm going to push back on you, and we've talked about this a million times. What you just said, I don't think it's as clear-cut about who's the starter and who's the backup. The only reason why you feel that way is because your team's a 30-point favorite against Louisville. I mean, I'm serious.
No, that's very true.
If you want to fast forward to December,
right
you got to play Georgia again. At that point in time, it's not little league left field where everybody gets the equal amount of turns.
No, I completely agree with you. And the bottom line is this. If you had to make that decision a long time ago, if it was Jalen Hurts wouldn't have stood that much of a chance last year. You know what I'm saying? If you weren't a 30-point favorite, you'd probably make the decision earlier to bench Jalen Hurts and bring it to. That's just the nature of the beast.
Let me get one more comment on this. This also comes from Facebook. Trey Duke says, Nick Saban is giving Jalen Hurts an ultimatum. Either you stay and help us win a title and we'll help you secure your financial future, or you can bet on yourself and transfer with a chance to go to the NFL. What I disagree with about what Trey says there in the comment section is I think it'd be good if Saban did give Hurts an ultimatum. Right now, I think he's given him sort of a soft, squishy alternative of, hey, let's just hang out and see how things work out. And you've also got, the conversation out there, and we've had this one before about, well, maybe Hurts bides his time another year in Tuscaloosa, becoming a graduate transfer. And at that point in time, maybe your options are a little more robust than they are if you're just leaving as a normal transfer. But the idea that Trey Dukes mentions of Saban's giving him an ultimatum, it'd be better for Hurts if Saban did give him an ultimatum. I think he's probably trying to more likely cloud him with a lot of sort of, puffery of, hey, things are fine. Who knows? You may be our guy.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything to be gained from an ultimatum. I really don't. I don't think there's anything to be gained for Alabama if Jalen Hurts heads elsewhere. I mean, we've seen it a bunch. I mean, just look at Georgia last year. Look at an injury at the quarterback position. You need a backup quarterback. And I think for that reason, Saban is giving Jalen every opportunity. I don't know if it's that much of a sales pitch the way I think that BA thinks it is, but I think it is giving him every opportunity possible to say he is a better passer and to make things look a lot better.
In fact, when Saban has talked about how Jalen Hurts performed most recently in the Alabama spring practice, obviously Saban was incredibly complimentary. Here is Saban on Hurts, who really had the spring to himself with Tua Tagovailoa being injured.
Jalen, I think, had a really good spring. We really tried to focus on continuing to help him develop confidence in the passing game. He has shown signs of being able to do that, and we want to continue to work on that. But he has done, a really good job. I think sometimes you can't just think about making plays. You have to make plays based on how they're designed and have some faith, trust, and confidence in the people that are playing with you, that if you go through your progression, that's going to give us the best chance to be able to make some explosive plays in the passing game. And when it breaks down, then you use your athletic ability to try to make up for it. But I think he's done much better at that this spring.
So right now, the definition of going through progressions for Jalen Hurts might not be just choosing which receiver to throw to, but which school to progress to next.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. And it's like I said, after the spring game, I don't know that the offensive line gave him enough of an opportunity to showcase his ability to really read progressions. I don't think he had enough time in the spring game to say, this is what we want to do. I want to go 1, 2, and 3. I think a lot of times he had to escape the pocket. But the bottom line is you haven't seen growth in him over the last 2 years, so there are a lot of decisions to make.
Let's do item number 2 here on our SEC Country Line First and 10 list. And to me, this is a very juicy topic here. As former Alabama quarterback John Parker Wilson goes on the very good sports radio station in Birmingham, WJOX. And Parker Wilson, given the fact that he played at Alabama, Kirby Smart was defensive coordinator there. High school days going back to the powerhouse there in suburban Birmingham, Hoover, when Jeremy Pruitt was kind of getting his coaching career started there as a position coach at the time. John Parker Wilson knows both these SEC coaches very well. Kirby at Georgia, Jeremy Pruitt now the brand new coach at Tennessee. And John Parker Wilson gave a pretty provocative opinion. He was talking about why he thinks that Pruitt's going to be so successful at Tennessee, goes so far to make a pretty bold comparison between Pruitt and Smart at Georgia. Here is the former Alabama quarterback from WJOX.
I think he'll be wildly successful at Tennessee. I hope he has enough success that he can come back and be the head coach at Alabama one day. I think his ability to connect with people is something that I've never seen. And Jeremy was a defensive backs coach when I was at Hoover. So he wasn't the coordinator. He was just a defensive backs coach. Came to Alabama when I was there and was an analyst. But the way he connects with people is unlike I've never seen. He's a great recruiter, and that's kind of where he got his start and where he rose so fast through Alabama and then at Florida State. But I just think what he's going to be able to do at Tennessee at a place like that with being the only show in town, with Tennessee being the only, big school in the state, he's going to do well. He scares me more at Tennessee than Kirby does at Georgia.
Whoa.
I think Georgia's going to be good, but I think down the road, Jeremy scares me more than Kirby does at Georgia.
So I have a feeling that you and I are about to really get into it over this. This is a ludicrous assertion. And frankly, to me, it reeks of haterism here from John Parker Wilson to say, Jeremy Pruitt, who just got his head coaching career started, is scarier than Kirby Smart at Georgia, who's got two things right now that Alabama doesn't have. And yes, I know Alabama's the reigning national champion, but they're not the SEC champion. Georgia is. And they didn't have the #1 class for the recruiting cycle of 2018. Georgia does. To say that Georgia, who has taken a couple of things a lot of Alabama folks think of as their birthright, Kirby Smart's been in charge of that. To say that Smart is somehow less scary than Jeremy Pruitt that's a pretty tough statement to defend.
Yeah, I mean, haterism is a very strong word. I mean, haterism, I don't think there's enough depth to JP's comments to where he thinks, boy, I'm going to take a shot at Georgia fans. I think that he honestly is making an assessment between two coaches that he knows very well, that has been past coaches of his, that he knows Jeremy Pruitt and Kirby Smart, both going all the way back to 2007. I think what John Parker Wilson did not do good enough. And by the way, full disclosure, I was at the lunch table with John Parker Wilson after he got off this conversation this weekend. He was down in Destin with me, and his Twitter was blowing apart. I mean, his Twitter was blowing apart, and he didn't realize he'd get that much attention for it. Because
and full disclosure for me, while I don't know John Parker Wilson personally, everything I've ever seen from him, he comes across as a great guy. He certainly knows football very well. I have no personal beef with JPW on this. I just think these words are asinine.
Right. And I understand. And listen, John Parker Wilson, he's not a football analyst. He's not some kind of SEC insider. This guy's a financial advisor working over at Birmingham. He's just giving his thoughts on the situation. So I don't know that he thought that deep. I don't know if he can name one of Georgia's recruits for the last cycle or one of Bama's for that matter. So this is John Parker just giving his thoughts. I think what he didn't do a good job of is letting the people understand that were listening to him that he views Tennessee as a bigger threat or scarier in a lot of different ways. Because Bama plays Tennessee every year. They play Georgia once every 7 years. And so I think that's what he was trying to get across is, hey, listen, if Jeremy Pruitt gets things steamrolling up there, it's going to be a lot worse for Bama in the long run because we see Tennessee every season. I don't think he got that point across. And for that, for that reason, a lot of people were up in arms about it. But here's what I will say in closing with that. I told John Parker at the lunch table on Friday that I think he's lost his mind. I think that, listen, I understand his love for Jeremy Pruitt. Jeremy Pruitt has done a lot of things you never would have expected him to do back in 2007, and I think a lot of people have a lot of respect for him for that reason. But anything that he thinks Jeremy Pruitt might be able to do, Kirby Smart's already done down at Georgia. So I think I agree with you to that.
On this same WJOX interview, John Parker Wilson did go into some more depth about why he thinks Pruitt could be better than Smart, or to use the word that's being tossed around here, a little scarier for Alabama than Smart. Here's more from WJOX.
I just think him as a head coach, not only recruiting, but bringing in other coaches, having a good staff. And, we haven't seen Tennessee really good in 10 years. And I think his ability to get them back, I think he's got a higher ceiling than Georgia does. And I know they're recruiting that they can do just down the road, an hour down the road in Atlanta is pretty strong. Tennessee, when they were good, they were recruiting on a national level, and they were getting quarterbacks from everywhere. They were getting receivers from everywhere. I think Jeremy has the ability to do that.
So it's interesting from John Parker Wilson, and the idea. Of course, Brandon Walker on the SEC Country official account today says I used the word haterism earlier. That's not a real word. That may not be a real word, but it's certainly a real concept. And for me, it's not an overt thing. It's a subliminal thing. And there's a backstory here. John Parker Wilson's been on WJOX before, and I think he's representative. Even if he's not an official analyst, he's representative about how a lot of people around the Alabama program feel. They don't like the fact that a guy that was at Alabama, who brought the charisma and energy that's really innate in Kirby Smart, gave that to his employer at the time, sort of traveled that back to his alma mater at Georgia and taking things that Alabama feels like it deserves, like five-star cornerback Tyson Campbell, like, five-star outside linebacker Brenton Cox. On and on we could go. Players that in previous regimes would have been in Alabama, and now they're at Georgia. Right. A lot of people at Alabama don't like that. So instead of giving Smart credit for what he's building at Georgia, let's toss a bouquet Jeremy Pruitt's way as a way of pretending like Kirby Smart at Georgia doesn't really exist.
Yeah, no, I understand why Georgia fans would be up in arms about that. I just think that we're all thinking a little bit too deep here. It's like I said, John Parker he doesn't even know who Tyson Campbell is, I guarantee you. He doesn't know, he's not thinking that deep into it. This is a guy giving his honest opinion about two guys he knows and the relationship he built with them back in 2007 and 2008. He knew Jeremy Pruitt. He knew what Jeremy Pruitt come from as a defensive backs coach at Hoover to where he is now. He knows that Jeremy Pruitt's a fast riser. He knows Jeremy Pruitt is a guy that can sweet talk, like the recruits call it, chop it up with a lot of the recruits, and he understands that. He's seen it firsthand. So I think that's why he's going out on a limb and saying, listen, if Jeremy Pruitt can get up and chop it up at Tennessee, we have to play them every year. And I think I don't think that he meant in any way to take away what Kirby Smart does. I know for a fact that John Parker and Kirby Smart are friends, so he's not trying to haterize or demonize what Kirby Smart's been doing at Georgia.
So I want to get some comments on this, and it's a lot of Georgia fans, as you might imagine, but let me take this back to Jeremy Pruitt for a moment and just analyze the substance of Jeremy Pruitt here as a recruiter. If you're a Tennessee fan watching right now, we're going to hear from a lot of you in just a minute. Here's the thing you got to question, though. For the future of the Vols, Pruitt has shown, you said chop it up. He's got those chop it up skills for sure. But what about when things go sour? What about when a recruit tells him no? Does Pruitt then have the demeanor to sort of take that, take a deep breath, move on, or kind of cycle back with a better pitch to sort of keep yourself in the ball game there? I think that Pruitt's demeanor is what's going to be at issue here. Can he handle himself on the sideline? Can he handle himself when he gets rebuffed by a recruit during a phone call? That's the stuff that Jeremy Pruitt's going to have to prove his ability to be able to handle. And will he even still be a coach 5 years from now? It's the demeanor that he crafts for himself as a head coach that's going to determine that.
I completely agree with you. I think that's why I disagree with John Parker. I mean, if I called John Parker right now, he'd sit there and tell you, Mike thought I was crazy on Friday when I said these things. I will tell you this, though. I mean, this is for Tennessee fans and Georgia fans alike. a lot of people at Alabama that I know, and probably John Parker included in that, had the same questions about Kirby Smart. Not whether or not he could do that, but the in-game management, the excitement that he has on the sideline. I mean, in Alabama, you would have to hold him down from jumping off the ground. I mean, he's running on the field, his headset's flying out, where his visor's flying off. Can this guy manage a game? Can he take the defensive coordinator headset off long enough to say, this is what we need to do offensively? I think he struggled with that in year one. I think there was a learning curve with Kirby Smart in year one, and I think he proved in year two that he was able to do that. Will there be a learning curve for Jeremy Pruitt? I have no doubt about it. He's never been a head coach at any level. There's going to be a learning curve from him, but in the long run, I do think that he will be. I don't want to say he's going to win national titles at Tennessee, but I do think he will be one of the most successful coaches they've had in quite a while.
Jerome Nottingham says John Parker Wilson needs to keep his thoughts to himself. Maurice Carter says we already know how much Kirby Smart's proven himself as the head coach of Georgia and is capable of proving much more in the near future. Pruitt hasn't even done himself half anything but coach a spring football game and didn't even do a very good job of doing that. Even by Pruitt's own standard, I think he'd probably agree with that. And I do think it's worth pointing out here that the threshold of going from having never coached a game to coaching a game, that's a really big deal here. And frankly, it's really an insult to Kirby Smart to even compare him to Jeremy Pruitt right now, because really the more fair comparison is another coach cut from the same cloth who's had more meager success as a head coach. It's really Will Muschamp we should be comparing to Jeremy Pruitt, not Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart's been in the college football playoff. He's in a different category of comparison now. How about compare Jeremy Pruitt to Will Muschamp? For me, if you give me a choice of who I want running my program, I want Muschamp over Pruitt, because everything that Pruitt does, Muschamp does too. He just has more experience doing it. So, I mean, at this point in time, talk to me about your Jeremy Pruitt, Will Muschamp comparison, not your Pruitt Smart comparison.
No, I agree. And listen, John Parker doesn't know Will Muschamp, so that's what I keep going back. He wasn't trying to take shots.
I'm picking on JPW. I'm just saying the general football sense.
No.
It's a Pruitt Muschamp comparison that's a lot more accurate and fair than any kind of Kirby Smart comparison with.
I completely agree with you, and I completely agree. Not only from an SEC perspective, from an Alabama perspective, I will agree with that. I'm very impressed with what Kirby Smart has done. I will say this, though. I mean, there have been fans out there that, there's a lot of people out there on this show, included in the comment section, that say Kirby Smart was the reason Nick Saban wins. Kirby Smart, that was the crutch that held Nick Saban up for so long. He hasn't been able to recruit without him, which I think is ludicrous. I look at it and go, man, are you crazy right now? This guy's won 5 national titles. And so I think that we can kind of get on that hierarchy and kind of go down the plane. You're not going to be able to figure it out until Jeremy Pruitt coached football. It's like we talk about Mississippi State. What do we expect of Mississippi State? Who knows? We don't know what Moorhead's going to be as a head coach, and until either one of them gets on the field, it's hard to really set up that hierarchy, even though we're going to do it with quarterbacks here in just a minute.
Over on YouTube, Cliff Nelson says, Will Muschamp's got more experience failing as a head coach than Jeremy Pruitt does, LOL. Y'all can LOL at Pruitt, at Muschamp if you want to, but I don't know if you've noticed, as of late, there's not been a whole lot of failing from Muschamp at South Carolina. They won 9 a year ago. They may win 10 this year. I mean, some of y'all got to update your mainframes on some of these guys that you never give Auburn any credit. You never give Muschamp any credit. Some of these guys are doing better than you think.
No, I understand. And Will Muschamp, to me, I don't know. I don't know if the end of that story is written for me. I think his ability to fire his offensive coordinator last year was a big deal. I think the ability to bring in Brian McClendon and say, you know what, this guy has failed me too long. I've got to move in another direction offensively. I think that was a huge stepping stone for him. But I've told you, I'm not on board with South Carolina winning 9-10 games this year like some people think. I think they cut it too close last year, and I don't know that they still have the bodies enough to run what Will Muschamp really wants to do defensively.
All right, let's talk about something completely different here. Item number 3 in our SEC Country Live First in 10 list. A pretty interesting weapon potentially emerging for Auburn here. Anthony Schwartz, who is a 2018 signee for the Auburn Tigers at wide receiver, but not an early enrollee. Stuck around his high school there in the state of Florida to be a part of a track and field season for senior year, making good on that. I want to show you some video here of Schwartz running the 100-meter dash, and he is blazing here, setting a Florida state record for the 100-yard dash. In fact, Schwartz himself tweeted this out, a little pat on the back here. 10.07 in the 100-meter dash, a state record for a guy that we already knew was fast. 10.07 is blazing.
It's unbelievable. And then you sit there and you ask yourself, well, how can this translate to football? What is it? Imagine the weapons. I mean, he's got Jared Stidham who can throw the ball a quarter mile, take the top off the defense. Having a guy like that outside, whether or not he's catching the passes is what I'm trying to make you understand. Whether or not he's catching or going for 1,000 yards, they've still got to defend the guy. I mean, streaking down the field at 10:07 is impossible. You've got to put a deep safety on him that opens up the middle of the field. That is such a weapon for Auburn. If they can get him ready to be part of this football team and get him on the field early, I'm telling you, it opens up so many things.
But you kind of glossed over it like a rhetorical question. I guess I do kind of mean it significantly. That kind of speed, I mean, how much does it change? We already knew he was a fast wide receiver. Now we know he's like extremely fast, on the verge of Olympic fast.
Yes.
I mean, how does that change your evaluation of what he might be able to provide for Auburn? Because it seems like, and this is somewhat anecdotal, but it seems like the fastest sprinters in recent SEC history, somehow they never quite made the impact in the field that you want them to.
Yeah.
Florida's had a couple of these guys. LSU's had one of these guys. And I'm probably getting my facts slightly wrong here, but it seems like these elite sprinters, you put them on the football field, it's more about the sprinting than it is finding a way to truly get the ball in their hands a lot.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying is I don't know that it changes what I already thought he was. I don't know that this is a guy you definitely don't redshirt now. I don't know if this is a guy you definitely do redshirt. I think the injuries at the wide receiver position obviously open up some opportunities for Anthony Schwartz. But it's difficult to look at it and say 10:07 in track and that really translates on the field. This is a guy, listen, there's a reason he runs 10:07 because he's 170 pounds. Yeah. So what do you really get out of him? I'm just telling you, even if he's not catching balls, even if he's not physical enough to really get on the line of scrimmage, which he's going to have to prove, think about it. I mean, he's from American Heritage. He's been going up against some pretty good corners during his time down in high school. So he's learned to get off press coverage probably. He's gotten a lot better at that. I think even just having him on the field provides such an issue for defense coordinators having to know where he's at.
On YouTube, there's some pretty good comments coming in. Katie McCarty, who's seen some of the film, says he didn't look that fast in pads in the highlight tape. Teresa Lowry, in response to that, says, pads are heavy. And that may be meant as a joke, but it really is true. It's one thing to run 10:07 when you got, like the, what do you call them, like the singlet or whatever you wear when you run track. Yeah. But it's another thing when you get those shoulder pads on, thigh pads, everything else. I mean, it is a little more difficult. Do they
we've
still
seen
wear
this.
thigh pads anymore?
Yeah, we've seen this before. I remember, I think it was Justin Gatlin maybe that tried out for a football team. We've seen sprinters try to make the transition in the NFL because of that reason, like I'm saying. Even if they're not catching passes, you still have to account for them back in the secondary. You still have to worry about putting a safety back. You still have to worry about trying to press them on the line of scrimmage. It changes everything for a defensive backfield when a guy is that fast on the field.
Mike Johnson's daddy also referenced the guy that, I know, it just kind of rolls off the tongue now. But
they call him MJD.
Right, MJD on,
MJD?
Not Maurice Jones-Drew, but Mike Johnson's daddy over on YouTube was referencing the guy that Tennessee had that was like Usain Bolt fast.
Right, yeah. I can't remember the guy's name last year, but I mean, Justin Gatlin and him actually raced last year, and Justin Gatlin's a Tennessee grad as well, known for obviously their speed. They've sent a couple of guys, and there has been guys like this, like I mentioned, that try to transition to the NFL. It doesn't always work out for those reasons. You have to have a little bit more bulk than 170 to really be considered a huge threat.
And I'll admit this, and this is going to make some people in the comment section mad. I don't say this to be trolling. I couldn't care less about track and field. To me, track and field has always seemed like practice for another sport, as opposed to like an actual sport itself.
No, I completely agree with you. And we had guys, and Bama still has guys. I think Tony Brown ran track this year. There's a couple of other guys that run track. I know, what is it? Was it Trenton Holiday down at LSU that ran track? Was a small guy. Just never, you have to be able to prove it on the field. You have to have more physicality than running a 10:07. And I'm not saying Anthony Schwartz won't do that. I'm just saying who will be a fixture with or without catching the ball.
Travis Betby says and Travis is an Auburn fan, he says he did play well in the Under Armour game, so that gives you a hope for his future there. The one thing I will say, though, to come back to the track thing, even though I'm not a huge fan of the sport, you do seem to see a connection between these 4- and 5-star guys that do pan out. A lot of them do have that track background, right? A lot of times when you see these 4- and 5-star guys end up not living up to a whole lot the next level, not doing that track stuff during the spring. I don't know what they're doing, playing Fortnite, I guess. But when you get that track background, that's a pretty good repertoire to have for that football sport.
Well, I think Kirk Herbstreit tweeted about it the other day. It's one of those things where just play more sports. Be active enough. If you weren't playing, track and field or baseball in high school, you had to be on the weightlifting team. You had to be doing something in the spring to keep that athleticism up, to keep that training up, and it gets to other muscles. You add bulk, you add speed, you get hip flexion, you do knee bend. All these other sports can add to some things, and it always happens. I think it was 29 of 32 first-round picks this year were multi-sport athletes in high school.
Yeah, but they're also elite athletes. They're going to be
right. You're gonna your high school coach is gonna be like, okay, you're playing for me too.
Yeah,
you're not just playing football.
I mean,
you're coming out of football too.
They don't need the specialization because they're already elite. All right, let me do item number 4 here in our SEC Country Line First in 10 list, and a subject we've talked about a lot for good reason, and that's the incoming freshman quarterback at Florida, Emory Jones, a guy that was really one of the centerpieces of the recruiting class for Dan Mullen, But after the spring, in which for the most part we saw Jones buried on the depth chart, the question becomes, is this guy still in the mix for the Florida quarterbacking job? And the kind of cloud that hangs over this discussion is, if you gave Florida fans their choice of who they'd want to see, I think most Gators fans would hope that Emory Jones is the guy because he represents new blood. As of right now, though, it seems like he's fighting an uphill battle. Recently on the Florida podcast from SEC Country with Zach Abolverdi and Jeff Cardozo, Zach, who's a great analyst, talking about the Florida Gators, weighed in on the future of Emory Jones, saying, hey, if the players want it, if the fans want it, that's one thing, but those kinds of considerations aren't going to creep into the mind of Dan Mullen.
It's not going to be about fan or player pressure. Whoever the fans or the players want to see under center as a starting quarterback for the University of Florida, that doesn't matter to Dan Mullen. Now, obviously, he wants to give everybody, touchdowns and points to cheer about, but he wants to put the best guy out there. And
so he wants to put the best guy out there, and this kind of brings to mind that old cliche of, hey, if you listen to people in the stands about who should start at quarterback, you'll be sitting with him there pretty soon. That's the old cliche here on this. But there is a flip side of that too, though, in that if there is a clear choice of the fans, and if that guy was sold on National Signing Day as being the sort of savior of Florida football, if that doesn't work out on the field for Mullen his first year in 2018, even if it's the right choice for Mullen to make, not playing him, there's going to be a little bit of diminished enthusiasm by the end of the season if it's just the quarterbacks that were already on the roster playing, because we've heard from a million Florida fans over the course of the last couple of years, they are tired of the quarterbacks they have.
No,
a lot of them are.
Well, I mean, I don't think Florida fans are that tired of Kyle Trask. It's the one you saw on the field all year last year that you go, boy, what are we doing with these guys out here? And Felipe Franks, I guess, is included in that group. And really, when I saw this come up as a topic today, I thought, you know what? There's no way that this guy's a third-string quarterback in the spring and passes up two guys that are in front of him just because they struggle. And then I thought back to Bama 2 years ago and Cooper Bateman and Blake Barnett, and then all of a sudden Jalen Hurts is third-string quarterback all spring. He was an early enrollee just like this, and all of a sudden is playing in game one. So not to say it can't happen. And I think there is the opportunity for Dan Mullen to get in the game and say our offensive line isn't what they need to be. Neither one of these guys can really escape the pocket like I want them to. We've got to try to move some things around, and maybe Emory Jones gives you a chance at chunking the ball farther downfield and doing some things with his legs and makes you a little bit better in the long run at the quarterback position. But I think Kyle Trask, and I've said this a couple of times, he showed me enough in the spring game, in sequence, on time, the ability to read some of these route trees, really get into his progressions, that if the offensive line holds up, he should be your guy at Florida. Emory Jones should take all the time possible and sit back there. Now, will it be some disappointment from Florida fans? I think so. I think that you look at it and go, boy, we thought he was a savior, and he's still sitting back there. But not everybody has to get on the field as a true freshman. It's something we've seen a lot recently, but not everybody has to do it, and Emory Jones deserves that little bit of leniency.
I think you're making an interesting point, though, in the comparison to Jalen Hurts. I hadn't really considered this. I'm glad you brought that up. Hurts, as you said, was third-string quarterback, and then you blink your eyes and he's the starter.
Right.
An unorthodox decision from Nick Saban, who had almost always previously in his career gone with the most most experienced player by the time you got to the real crucial time of the season. But Hurts, when you add the dynamic of the legs, just was the better overall choice. Emory Jones also, during practice, running is not a big part of them, assuming what they're doing, because they're not hitting quarterbacks.
Especially during spring practice.
Yeah, especially during spring practice. Is there a chance that when you allow him to run around during an actual game, that all of a sudden, even if he's not the polished passer, even if he doesn't know all the route tree and all the other things that Mullen wants his quarterbacks to know, is he just the better option because he is the one guy that can run around a little bit? Especially in comparison to the competition, Trask, who I don't think much of, and Felipe Franks, who we've seen.
Yeah, no, it comes back to the offensive line, right? That's why I'm still not ready to bury Jalen Hurts, because I saw what the offensive line was in the spring game. You look at it and say, well, he didn't have time to make the predict. He couldn't go from 1 to 2 to 3 receivers. It was smart of him to get out of the pocket. His offensive line wasn't blocking well. There is the opportunity, I think, to where you get into game 1 or game 2 or game 3 down there in Florida, and all of a sudden you look at Kyle Trask getting sacked 5 times or Felipe Frank getting sacked a bunch, and you say, you know what? Let's give this guy a chance. What do we have to lose at this point to get Emory Jones on the field? Now, do I think it would happen? Would my gambling money be on it? Absolutely not. Like I said, I think Kyle Trask is a guy who's shown a little bit of ability. But Emory Jones, I wouldn't bury him just yet and say definite redshirt.
Thomas Davis in the comment section says, I like Kyle Trask better than Felipe Franks. And I think there's some Florida fans that may be gravitating that direction just because they haven't really seen Trask yet. The tough thing for Dan Mullen here is, and look, there's just a nature of conversations that can at times be unfair. This may be a bit of an unfair conversation for Mullen, but he was touted as the quarterback whisperer. The guy that was a valuable commodity as Florida coach because of the work that he'd done with Nick Fitzgerald, who was not a big-time recruit coming out of high school, and what he did with Dak Prescott, who at least comparison to a lot of SEC quarterbacks was not a truly elite recruit here. If by the end of the season, if one of these Florida quarterbacks doesn't look like a real future star, Mullen's going to take a credibility ding for that. There's just no way around it.
That's very possible. I'm not going to ding him personally because I think that sometimes maybe the best thing for Emory Jones is sitting to bench. If that's what it takes for Dan Mullen to be a quarterback whisperer, to know exactly what to do with these quarterbacks and to know when to play them and when not to play them, then I'm not going to ding him for that. But I do think you're right. That will be used against him on the recruiting trail. As far as, hey, come play for me. I can get you on the field. I can do all these things with a quarterback. And if he's not able to do that with Kyle Trask or Emory Jones, it does. I can see some guys recruiting against that fact.
MJD says if Mullen, this is on YouTube, if Mullen can develop quarterbacks, Franks would be showing some signs of that already. Is that a fair thing to say that 3 or 4 weeks worth of practices, we should have seen more from Felipe Franks during the spring than we did?
I don't think so. It's like starting from scratch. I can't say this enough. They're all learning a new offense, a completely new offense. They're learning how to not just raise, not just what to say in the huddle, not just what progression is. Learn how to flip their hips. They're learning how to roll out more in this offense. They're learning how to use these option plays in the backfield. So many different things that Felipe Franks is really not accustomed to doing, and really I don't think any of them are really accustomed to doing, especially when you hear Emory Jones, high school coach, say he's a pocket passer. I think they're all learning just how to be a part of the system now. I think during the summer, though, and during fall camp, that's when you see it start to take off.
Final take on the subject belongs to Chino Mandohano, who says, as long as the offensive line stays healthy and blocked, the offense is going to be awesome, and it doesn't matter who plays quarterback. Chino, thanks for weighing in on that subject. Let's do item number 5 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list, and kind of a unique difference in opinions when it comes to some SEC quarterbacks here. Let me start with Mel Kiper, the ESPN draft analyst, who is very high on Drew Lock, coming back for a final year here at Missouri and maybe on his way into the first round of the 2019 NFL Draft. Kiper on ESPN says, I think he was wise to go back to Missouri for another year, but I think he's a guy a lot of people are going to be excited about. If you want to isolate one guy who the NFL is already looking at and who they have a high opinion of for next year, it's Drew Lock. Mel Kiper, draft analyst, says NFL teams are excited about Drew Lock. But Bill Bender, who covers college football for the Sporting News, when he ranked his top 25 quarterbacks in all of college football, Lock wasn't even the top SEC name on the list. Tua Tagovailoa, who's barely played, Jake Fromm, who'll just be a sophomore, take the top SEC positions at number 2 and number 3 on the list there. Lock comes in as the number 7 overall quarterback and number 3 in the SEC. You see the rest of the list from Bill Bender there at the Sporting News, who's a good guy and a good sports writer. So I'm going to ask you, you want Tua and Fromm, or Tua or Fromm, or do you want Drew Lock? Is Lock the best quarterback in the SEC?
First of all, just looking at this list, I think it's a little bit, to me, it's a little bit ridiculous that Tua, Fromm, and Drew Lock are all in front of Jarrett Stidham. I know I poke holes in Jarrett Stidham all the time. Jarrett Stidham, to me, is probably the best one on that list. Now,
I think you're probably right about that.
I think Jake Bentley has to move way far up. I think that the ability that Tua and Jake are going to have with the teams around them says a lot, and I think that they might be there at the year's end. And honestly, I think Drew Lock, and I said this last week, to me, Drew Lock might fit an NFL system better than he does a college system. We talk about it all the time, turnover ratios, throwing interceptions. Those things, to me, are so much more important in the college game than they are in the NFL. You know what? If you go out and lose 6 games in the NFL, you're still going to the playoffs. You know what I mean? You could throw the interceptions because you're chunking it down deep. You can throw up jump balls in the NFL, and you have guys like Odell Beckham and Dez Bryant and Julio Jones who can go up there and get the ball. You can take those chances. To me, in the college game, he's taking a few too many chances. Now, you can't take away what he's done. Listen, what he passed for 58% last year. He has 4,000 passing yards. He's got all the numbers. To me, he's a little bit too much of a gunslinger for the college game, but I understand why, with that big arm and the ability to really heave it and the comparisons to Brett Favre, why NFL scouts might look at him and say, boy, this guy's going to be really good.
I think you're fair about Jarrett Stidham. He's probably too low on the list. I think you and I both, when it comes to Drew Lock, we've said the same thing before. The idea that Derek Dooley is going to be his offensive coordinator, that is just a real big question mark for me. And maybe it is the NFL where Lock finally shows off his wares because, I mean, y'all, the last time we saw Derek Dooley, he's wearing those confounded orange pants on the Tennessee sideline. Are you going to tell me that guy's going to draw up some, great offensive game plan for Drew Lock? I just don't see it. And, if you gave me the choice, I probably would take Fromm over Drew Lock for right now. Bobby J. Smith in our Facebook comment section says, I don't like Tua being at number 2, given the fact that he's barely played.
Yep.
I'd probably take him over Drew Lock as well, and I might even take him if he flipped teams.
Yeah, no, it's tough. It's like I said, I think the only reason you look at this list and kind of, it's all about what could the future be. To me, Drew Lock is a gunslinger. He takes a lot of risk, and I don't know if it's fair. Listen, I definitely don't think it's fair to put Tua at the top. I don't have Jake Fromm anywhere near that number 3 spot either. I got to have Jake Bentley higher up than Jalen Hurts at this point. I mean, it is what it is. I think you have to move a lot of these names around, in my opinion. But I don't think that Drew Lock, to me, slides at the top of that list.
Our buddy Brandon Walker's in the comment section, who does more cowbell every day on the SEC Country Mississippi State page. I mean, how about the fact that there's this whole campaign built around Mississippi State may win 10 games because of Nick Fitzgerald, but according to Bill Bender, Fitzgerald will be the holder on kickoff.
Yeah.
On field goal attempts at Alabama, he'd be third-string quarterback.
Yeah, I don't know. And I've said this before, I think Keaton Thompson, to me, might be one of the best backup quarterbacks in the SEC. So Nick Fitzgerald, can he get healthy? Can he get back from it? I think that has a lot to do with where Mississippi State goes this year. I'm nervous, though, for Nick Fitzgerald at Mississippi State, and I've told Brandon Walker this before. To me, Nick Fitzgerald was so locked in. He's not a pocket passer per se. Now, Dan Mullen did a lot of good things with him. Can he keep that progression under Moorhead's system? I think that's a big question that's going to need to be answered from them as well.
All right, by the way, in our Facebook comment section, I think Jamie Blanton's upset with you. You mind if I read this?
Uh-oh.
He says, Mike, you going to respond? South Carolina won't win 9 or 10 games? You're crazy, sir. The kicking game is finally straightened out.
Yeah.
Offense won't be conservative. Offense has grown up with each other in year 3 now. Debo Samuel is back. Defense led the SEC in turnovers. Dude, just watch what happens. 3, 6, 9 wins. That's the transition here, the growth. 10 to 11 wins this season is where we will be. You are crazy to think otherwise. I always like it when someone finally criticizes Mike. All y'all are beating me up all the time. Jamie, let me just say thank you for actually giving Mike some grief right here.
I understand it. I think that, listen, if I had to craft out a perfect season for South Carolina, then you're probably hitting the nail on the head. Maybe, maybe they can find a way to beat Georgia. Maybe this year is the year they beat Clemson. Maybe they don't hiccup along the way like they did losing by 10 points to Kentucky last year. And so that's the reason I have a hard time believing it. Now, I think that...
Man, Debo, see, this is where I know they lost some close games. You want to ding them for the Kentucky loss. But when you lose Debo Samuel to injury, that changed the dynamic here. I mean, y'all, I think that Debo Samuel is one of the most dynamic players in the SEC. I agree with the commenter on this. You put him in some of these games where he wasn't playing last year and what was a close South Carolina win, in some cases a 2-touchdown win because of not just as a wide receiver, but in the kicking game. That can still be a factor for a guy like Samuel, who will still return kicks and not just take the free touchback. Debo Samuel changed the dynamic for South Carolina.
But I think even South Carolina fans will agree to this point. If it takes Debo Samuel for you to not lose by 10 points to Kentucky Wildcats, then we're talking about an entire other issue. I understand he's a good player, and maybe that puts you over the top in some close games, but you shouldn't be losing that game to Kentucky last year. That's not something Jake Bentley and Will Muschamp combined should have been doing last year. You go to other games. I think they scored 15 points against Tennessee last year. Are you kidding me? The Tennessee's defense was porous last year. And so until you can show the consistency that I need to see, you should have lost to NC State. They had twice as many yards from scrimmage as you did last year. I'm not saying they won't be good, but right now I've got them penciled in for 8, possibly 9 wins last year. You've got to take Georgia and Clemson off the table at this point. I think they hiccup some other ones along the way.
By the way, if we're talking about quarterbacks, let me get one more comment here. Bo Molinari, our Facebook comment section, says, Nick Starkel's going to be a breakout quarterback in the SEC.
I agree with that.
And if you had some cojones, you'd talk about the kid from Mizzou. We did talk about Drew Law.
Listen, I think that Nick Starkel, in my opinion, I do agree. But how many times last year did we talk about Jarrett Stidham and say he hasn't played a snap in the SEC? That was the argument I always said. I got to see it on the field, man. I got to be able to see you come against SEC defenses from week 1 to week 12 or whatever it is. And as good as I think Nick Starkel is, by the way, I was on Nick Starkel a year ago at this point. As good as I think Nick Starkel might be in Jimbo Fisher's system, hasn't proven the ability to play a full season and really jump up there in terms of these SEC defenses.
All right, fascinating topic here. Item number 6 in our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. You may remember going back to Tennessee spring game, Jeremy Pruitt said some of his players essentially flat out quit during the game, really called them out in his post-game press conference. Well, Pruitt goes on midday 180. That's a sports talk radio show in Nashville. 104.5 The Zone maybe is the sports station there in Nashville that airs this. It's definitely in midday 180. That's the name of the show. And he was asked a pretty interesting question. How did your players respond to such blunt and honest talk? And Pruitt gave another blunt and honest answer.
I'm trying to figure out what y'all want me to be. You don't want me to be honest?
No, we love it. We definitely love honesty, and but it's a refreshing approach today because there are a lot of coaches who take a new job and it feels like they're hedging their bets already.
So Pruitt turns it back on the host. Wait a second. I'm trying to be honest. Media, all of a sudden now you don't want me to be honest, and you heard the response from the host, and then Pruitt came back with another sort of explanation for why he thinks such bold honesty is truly required.
I think it's important that everybody knows where they're at. If you play defensive back and you don't play with the right toughness, or you don't give enough effort, or maybe you're great at playing man-to-man, or you got really good feet, or you play the ball great. You need to know those things. You need to know what your strengths are. You need to know what your weaknesses are. If you don't, how do you address it? How do you improve on it? So I think that's what you got to be.
So he says you got to be that honest. Guys who quit, you got to tell them they quit in a press conference for their mamas and daddies.
I agree.
To hear you say you agree. Expound on your thoughts.
I agree because I've seen it. I've been on the Nick Saban's first team that went 7-6. I mean, we had those guys. We had those guys that weren't mentally tough, that didn't want to buy into the process like Nick Saban always talks about, that didn't want to have the toughness to really come out and struggle through things. Listen, I don't need this. I'm NFL bound. Well, guess what? We didn't have any draft picks back in 2007 in the NFL, and that was the tough realization for a lot of these guys. And I think Tennessee's got some of these guys. Juwan Jennings is one of these guys that I think that Jeremy Pruitt is dealing with right now, making them understand, listen, You think you're a king in Knoxville, but I'm telling you right now, it won't win in the long run. I think he's having these guys really start to understand and buy into this thing that, you know what, maybe we think we're the cream of the crop. And Antonio Callaway went through that last year, where you thought you could just do whatever and get away with it. It's a hard reality out there, man. Once you get outside of those confines of Knoxville, Tennessee, that you're not that great. I think he's trying to make people understand that there's no skipping that process. You've got to put the work in every day, and that's why I liked his honesty.
All right, here's my problem with it, though, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong about this. If you look at, like, the social media accounts for all these SEC teams and the way the coaches talk, all the SEC programs are trying to tell a story. The story of either trying to stay on top like Alabama, or the story of trying to get to the top, which is what the rest of the teams in the SEC are trying to talk about here. Good stories have happy endings. And the problem for Tennessee here is, if the story starts with our players quit during the spring game, the only way you rectify that is being better during the fall. Boy, it's a great sports movie. These guys were not ready to play during the spring, but by the end of the season, look how Pruitt whipped them into shape. What if they don't get whipped into shape? And if you look at Tennessee's schedule and you look at the talent on that roster, there's a very good chance it doesn't happen. Well, Pruitt's already told the fans the players are quitters. So now that word's going to be in their mouth to come on here in SEC Country Live in our comment section in the afternoon and say, those guys quit again, just like Jeremy Pruitt said they did.
Yeah.
But Pruitt's not going to want to say that about his team during the fall. He was free to say that during the spring. He's going to want to say something different during the fall. But if the results aren't better on the field, all of a sudden, Pruitt's sort of backed into a corner here where he can't change the narrative that he started. This, to me, was a misstep for a first-year coach. It's one thing of an experienced coach is that blunt during the spring, but these are words that are tough to walk back. I think an experienced coach does not say what Pruitt said here. He's selling it on the radio as honesty, maybe in this case too much.
Here's where I'll bite back against your story. I don't think 2018 Tennessee Volunteers is a Cinderella story. I just don't.
That's why I think you're putting yourself in a tough position by saying that.
I understand that, but I think that you also put yourself in a position, and we've talked about it before. You've got 12 guys that you signed last year, they're showing up in the summer. 13 guys back from injuries, 4 graduate transfers. Got guys like Wanya Morris that are setting themselves up to be cornerstones, right? Wanya Morris gets on there and says, boy, I wanted to start something special. And I think that's what Jeremy Pruitt is selling these recruits right now. Doesn't have to sell the guys on the team. You know what? If you're quitters, we're going to find somebody who wants to come in here and play. I think that's what the building block he's trying to set, the standard he's trying to set, is that we're not going to accept anything than your best. And I think that once you start that kind of groundswell, other players within your program take notice. They say, listen, that guy at the top that we thought was all world, it turns out he's riding the pine this week. And all of a sudden, guys behind him are starting to rise, and the competition gets better, and then you do sign better players. I don't think it's going to be this year. I'm with you. And there is going to be at some point, they've got to win games to sell to recruits and say, boy, the development really is working. But I don't think it's got to be this year, and I think Jeremy Pruitt's fine with that. I think he's fine with throwing some of those players under the bus for the big picture.
Item number 7 here on our SEC Country Live First in 10 list, Tyler Fromm, the brother Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm had a big announcement over the weekend, announcing that he's committing as a member of the 2019 class to Auburn. You see Tyler there in the middle, Gus Malzahn on his left, his parents there on his right. Of course, as you say, you recognize that last name. Jake Fromm, Tyler's brother, is the Georgia quarterback. And normally when you see the Fromms cozying up to a coach, it's in a photograph with Kirby Smart. This time, Georgia's bitter rival Auburn gets the benefit here from Tyler. That didn't stop Jake Fromm, though, from congratulating his brother on Twitter, saying, way to make mom and daddy proud there. So kind of a cool moment from Jake Fromm with Tyler Fromm. Now, we should point out that Georgia is just jam-packed with tight ends. They got enough tight ends they can invade Grenada. So there's not really a lot of room for Tyler necessarily at Georgia.
Right.
Dogs just sort of have a glut at that position already. So apart from that, how weird is it to have your brother playing on, I mean, when it comes to Georgia rivals, Auburn's about as tip-top on that list as you can get.
Right, yeah.
Not the number one maybe, but no worse than number two probably. So how weird is it at the Thanksgiving table to have one young boy at one school and another one at the other?
Yeah, house divided, right? I gotta be honest with you for a second here, and this is nothing to do with Tyler Fromm or Jake Fromm. I started groaning already when I saw this because I'm like, every story we're going to have to hear about brother versus brother and Thanksgiving table and all
this.
It's going to be terrible. It's going to be rough.
Overkill. Driven into the ground. Overkill.
Overkill.
No doubt.
But I will say this. I think that Tyler Fromm made the smart decision. I mean, obviously, I'm sure he had some other offers out there, and he's obviously a very talented player. I think it would have been easy to say, boy, I'm not going to go to a rival of my brother. He did what's best for him in the long run. And you got to give Auburn credit, too. I mean, this is a quality player. Auburn in the last week has jumped up from 32 in recruiting rankings to like 15 or 16. So they continue to add to it. I think this is the best of all scenarios for these two brothers. Obviously, you couldn't fit them at Georgia right now. I don't think Georgia was recruiting them at all. But you have a starting quarterback brother at one school and a tight end that's going to be very good at another school, and I think this is as good as a story as you can find.
I guess the weird part of it to me is, and we see this with coaches, dad at one school, son at another, brothers at one school, brother at another. In the case of these players, I mean, now they'll be eating at Thanksgiving together. Their game will already be over, but when they're meeting with their family on just like a regular Sunday dinner or something like that, they're both going to know secrets that can really help the other school.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens all the time, so I guess it's not as weird as I think it is. Yeah. But there is that weird knowledge that, if you could ever, I don't know, if you could ever extract that information, that's really usable intel.
Yeah. If you're ever at home, like on the bye week, you go stoop in your brother's backpack, try to find that playbook.
I mean, I don't think that either of these two Fromms would do that, but it is really funny. I mean, information is power in college football. These two guys, rooms right next to each other in the house, I'm assuming, they got a lot of information the other one could really get some use out of.
There is that funny part of it. Is it Tyler Fromm, right? Tyler Fromm goes home and goes, man, hey, brother, can you help me out, watch some of this film with me? I really want to know what I'm doing wrong on this post route, And then all of a sudden, Jake's watching it going, boy, that route combination looks familiar. I see that signal right there.
Yeah.
There is some of that.
But even in this picture right here, I mean, how much is Malzahn wanting to ask the Fromms? So what's really going on with your son and Justin Fields? What's really going on there? He's wanting to ask about that.
I got to tell you, though, I don't think this X's and O's, I don't think it could ever happen. I've mentioned that before. I think that is so overblown to think somebody knows somebody's playbook. But I do think there's an interesting part of this to where you say, boy, going into that week, Jake Fromm's kind of gimpy on his ankle. He got rolled up the week before.
Yeah.
Boy, I mean, there's got to be that part of Gus Malzahn. Hey, Tyler, how's your brother? Icing down? Was he going to treatment every day? Like, what's the deal going on there, man? I don't think the playbook thing comes into play, but that is an interesting situation.
Point. And that's the kind of stuff you accidentally let slip out without meaning to sometimes.
Right.
Item number 8 here on our SEC Country Line First and 10 list. Little bit of a problem for Mississippi State linebacker Leo Lewis. Lewis is somewhat controversial given his relationship with the Ole Miss NCAA case, but on the field he's a very good player. But he does get into a little bit of trouble here over the weekend. Gets arrested here. He put out on Twitter a message that he had then deleted saying it's a cruel, unjust world. Come so far in his life, essentially defending himself against any kind of charge for wrongdoing here. Mississippi State also has a response to this themselves on Twitter, as collected by Will Salmon, a reporter, who says, we are aware of the situation involving Leo Lewis earlier this morning. We're still collecting information. We'll have no further comment at this time. You may be wondering exactly what happened here. The sheriff's office that has the jurisdiction there in the county in Mississippi also put out their own description here. They say deputies were originally dispatched to Aspen Heights Apartments for a call. Large crowd of people and cars blocking the streets. Deputies were attempting to clear the streets. A vehicle driven by Lewis attempted to push through traffic despite deputies' directions for traffic to exit in the opposite direction. After several attempts to gain compliance, Lewis was taken into custody. That's the statement from the police department there. Is this a distraction on field for Lewis, a good player, the Mississippi State defense that really needs it?
I don't think it's, listen, if anybody has proven the fact that they didn't get distracted, Leo Lewis has had every distraction in the book, and he seems to somehow seems to keep rolling. I mean, how many people in Oxford has he been sued by at this point and asked to show up at all these depositions and all that? So I think this is at the lower end of the totem pole. And I will say this, for Mississippi State fans out there that want to believe in Leo Lewis and say the best things about him, I had two teammates in Tuscaloosa arrested very similar situations like this. I brought one of them up before. Rashad Johnson was shoved in the back in the middle of a bar fight. Somebody hopped on top of him, put on handcuffs, and all of a sudden his name's scrolling across the bottom line of ESPN. I had another guy, Simeon Castile, a lot of people remember. He goes to talk to his buddy out on the strip that stopped at a stoplight. Light turns green. He doesn't notice it. Cops arrested him for stopping traffic right out in the middle of the street. It was like, and it's just one of those things where it's a bad situation. Leo Lewis was probably in the wrong place at the wrong time and should have acted better, but I'm not going to sit here and demonize this kid and say he's the worst of the worst and say that he should have done better. He got caught.
But if he violated the police order to...
I completely agree.
That's more than
not making excuses. I agree.
He turned it into the wrong place.
Yeah, no. I'm not making excuses for him. I'm just saying that it's not like this is a drug bust. He didn't get a DUI. It was a bad decision, and I think he'll grow from it.
Brandon Walker, who's running our SEC official Facebook page here, notices the fact that I sort of sidestepped pronouncing the Mississippi County. He says it's Oktibbeha.
They're usually good at pronouncing those things.
Yeah, I try to stay away from that one, though. All right, let's do item number 9 here on our SEC Country Line First in 10 list. And I have a shockingly hot take about a relatively benign story here. There is a report out there that former LSU star Booger McFarland, who has been an analyst on the SEC Network, ESPN, in the college football realm, is moving to the pro football world. Richard Deitch, who has covered media stuff for a long time, says that he's landed as an analyst on Monday Night Football. He's going to be an on-field analyst. Jason Witten, I guess, is going to be the guy in the booth along with the play-by-play announcer. McFarland's going to do some analysis work from down on the sidelines. And here's my shockingly hot take on a relatively small story. I think McFarland jumping from college football to the NFL here is an example of what I think is sort of a problem with the college football media. I think there are too many guys, and I guess people, if you want to say it that way, in the college football media world who are only using college football TV as a way of auditioning for NFL jobs. The NFL jobs pay great. These Monday Night Football gigs like this, it's millions of dollars. Obviously, you wouldn't turn the job down. But there are too many guys who are doing this in the hopes of getting the NFL instead of because they love college football. I don't always love Kirk Herbstreit. He's an example of the opposite of what I'm talking about. That's a college football lifer who has a clear passion for the sport when he speaks about it. McFarland was a good analyst, but we got to have these guys stop using this as just a minor leagues to go on and do NFL Sunday Countdown or Monday Night Football or something like that. That's got to stop. We need better, more devoted college football media.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think I don't know how to stop people from doing that. I think, listen.
Yeah, I'm not trying to restrict trade.
Right. I think you'd be hard pressed to go to Booger and say, you know what, you shouldn't take that $4 million a year or whatever. I don't know what he's getting. The problem for me is that there's too much turnover in the NFL jobs. I mean, how many Sean? We had Tony Kornheiser, for God's sake, like 3 years ago. Dennis Miller was a Monday Night Football guy a few years ago. There's been so many bad decisions made that I'm really on board with Booger going. Listen, I've met Jason Witten a couple times, the nicest guy in the world. I don't know anybody that really hates Jason Witten. So put that combination together, a lot of SEC heaviness right there, move those two guys into the booth. I'm all about it, man. To me, it says SEC football's king, even when you turn on Monday Night Football.
But you're an example of what I wish more of this was. Like, you played in the NFL, you played at Alabama. You could do any kind of analysis work. You could have gravitated towards the NFL, but you specifically gravitated towards college football. That was your choice. I mean, I'm not going to start getting into names here and start, criticizing a bunch of college football TV analysts, but there is a lack of passion I think you hear in a lot of their conversation. It really is. They love football and they like being on TV, but the teams and the programs we care about, those fall Saturdays, I'm not quite sure it's sacrosanct enough to them. They would gladly move on the NFL if they could because it's sort of a bigger gig. But isn't there a place in college football media for guys that like college football and want to stay there?
I agree. To me, you mentioned the word passion. To me, it was never there for the NFL. I don't think you listen. The NFL is not a backyard sport. Not until you get to the Northeast, really, and then it becomes a kind of backyard sport. These people that are college football fans, all you guys in the comment section, it's like defending your backyard, man.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. Over here on YouTube, by the way, MJD says, BA, but if nobody ever leaves these college football jobs, you and Mike Johnson are going to be on YouTube Live forever. Listen, this is where I want to be.
Yeah, you people get this
talking to
misconstrued.
y'all, sitting in this studio, even though the air conditioning's not working today. Like, this is where I want to be. There's no better job.
No, I'm telling you, I'll get it misconstrued. Y'all act like I don't have anywhere else to go. Like I'm pinching pennies or something, coming to SC Country going, please give me a job. Well, I like being here and doing this. This is a good job.
Estevez says the same thing. Hey, you can talk about the Monday Night Football money, but nobody pays more than SEC Country Live.
There you go.
Yeah, this guy rolls up in a Rolls Royce every day.
Yeah.
Like the toughest decision this guy makes is, I'm gonna drive like the McLaren, I'm gonna drive the Rolls Royce. Yeah. Am I gonna go to like
that clunker truck I got outside?
Tahiti? Am I going to Fiji? I mean, these are the tough choices guys like you are making.
I like hanging out.
It takes more vacation.
Tell you say stuff like that.
Takes more vacation. All right. Speaking of big weekends and having fun, let's do item number 10 here on our SEC Country Life First and 10 list. And for those of you that think I never call Kirby Smart out for anything, here's an example of me calling Kirby Smart out. I think this is a terrible job. Now, let me show you this picture first. This is a photo from Coach Sam Pittman. That's Georgia's outstanding offensive line coach. A yearly tradition at his house is a Kentucky Derby party. A lot of neighborhoods have these. You see the ladies in their hats. A lovely looking crowd there. It seems like everybody's having a really good time and really getting into the spirit of the Kentucky Derby. Now let me show you this other picture. Here is a close-up of Pittman with his boss, Kirby Smart, who in this photo looks like the guy who got dragged to one of his employees' parties here. And Kirby Smart's wearing a Georgia visor, essentially his game day sideline attire, to Sam Pittman's house. It's always a big deal when the boss comes over to your house. He's not dressed in Kentucky Derby finery.
Yeah.
I got to criticize Kirby for this.
I don't know if Kirby Smart has like a hairstyle. I was like sitting there looking at the visor going, what does his hair look like without that visor? I don't know if it looks like anything. You got to criticize for that. Kirby, you're my boy, man. What are you doing? You got to show up looking classier than this. He looks like he just got off a recruiting trip or a golf course.
Let me ask Hannah about this. She's not only one of our producers, she's the
fashion.
Yeah, listen, high society fashion. She's all over the place. Would you agree with me that you can't be wearing the visor to a Kentucky Derby party, especially when it's the same sweaty visor you've been wearing on the sideline all season long?
It's a bad look.
I'm getting a head shaking yes on this. So for those of you that think I can never criticize Kirby, that's my Kirby criticism. Teresa Lowry, though, who's a Tennessee fan, says she kind of likes it. SEC Savage on YouTube says Kirby has hair. Is that kind of what it is? I mean, Kirby just not wanting to show off the hair on a Saturday like that?
Usually it's like anytime I've ever seen Kirby, his bangs are sweaty. You know what I mean? Like like he's been yelling at something, doing something. He just, hey, listen.
Dan Riggins on YouTube says you can take the boy out of South Georgia, but and the rest of that. Maybe that's the case here a little bit as well. All right, here on SEC, there you go. That's some Kirby hair. How about Hannah? Yeah. I mean, maybe this is the reason why Kirby Smart's got the visor on. That is so well done by our buddy Hannah there on that. Maybe that's the reason why Kirby had the visor. Maybe in retrospect, the visor was not such a bad choice. All right, here on SEC Country Live, we're always looking to close the show the same way every day. And our friends over at the Chick-fil-A Charity Classic, they do the Chick-fil-A kickoff every single year and the Peach Bowl. It's run by a fantastic organization, and to raise money this time of year, they always do the big golf tournament there at Lake Oconee, which is a very swank resort area in Georgia. And they had some coaches there recently, and taking a page from, is it Jimmy Kimmel's playbook here with the taking a page from Kimmel's playbook with the reading of mean tweets. How about Gus Malzahn and Dan Mullen reading some of the criticism they've gotten on Twitter? This was pretty funny from the friends at the Chick-fil-A Classic. Take a look.
Gus Malzahn closes a cereal box without rolling up the bag. What?
Dan Mullen and his staff look like the Kids Bop kids grew up and made a mixtape.
So I had to admit, I've got kids, but I'd never heard of the Kids Bop kids before.
Yeah, I didn't even know what that was.
That picture in your head, for those of you that are not familiar with the Kids Bop kids, take a look at this.
Which one's Dan? The one on the left?
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe a little bit of a forced, coolness on Twitter, maybe.
Yeah, for sure.
So pretty funny there. Good job by the Chick-fil-A Charity Classic. They raised a lot of money for a great cause, and thanks to Mullen and Malzahn for reading the mean tweets. Although These coaches have no sense of humor whatsoever.
No, it's funny. Yeah, there was like Dabo Swinney was on there.
Yeah.
He didn't get it.
It was actually a longer video. The other ones that from the ACC coaches,
Pat Narduzzi.
Hey, some of these coaches can barely read, at least seemingly, and they have no sense of humor whatsoever.
Yeah, Pat Narduzzi didn't think anything was funny. He's just like, I don't get it.
He explain to some of these guys what humor even is. But we're not like that. We have senses of humor, and we're glad that you laugh along with us here every afternoon. We're going to say goodbye for right now. In between now and our next show, though, you can check out our podcast on all the various podcast channels. We'd love to have you subscribe there, especially on Apple Podcasts. Give us a rating and review. Share the show on video with your friends on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. Let them know we're talking about the SEC here each and every afternoon. And we will see you back here 3 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow for another episode of SEC Country Live. Y'all have a great day.